let the blood rain from the sky!
Chris, I know you don't like Halloween. That's an understatement. But I thought it would be fun if you dressed up for some of your videos this year. Why? So I had the Pony Fangirl pick out an outfit for you. Have fun and good luck, Steve. As if it's not bad enough, I'm doing Halloween-themed videos. What could this possibly be? Really? I am not wearing this the whole video. Mazes and Monsters is a TV movie adaptation of the Rona Jaffe book of the same name. It was loosely based on a real-life news story that involved a 16-year-old college prodigy who took his own life. At the time, the story was that the student was motivated to do this because of his love of Dungeons & Dragons. Since then, the officials investigating the case wrote a book clarifying that his love of the game was not the main benefactor, but rather things like pressure from his parents, depression, drug use, and closeted homosexuality. 'Cause it was the 80s after all, before Harry Potter and video games, we had other things we had to worry about, such as drugs, alcohol, rock and roll music, and of course ARPGs. I believe that's how that's pronounced. There were a lot of these kind of movies back then that used Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games in general as a plot point. Not only did films use this, but of course Jack Chick created one of his infamous Chick Tract comics known as Dark Dungeons, which convinced its readers that the game was a gateway into Satanism, witchcraft, orgies, and suicide rituals. This eventually got a film adaptation in 2014, which was intended to be super serial, and if you disagree and tell me that it was parody, then you are a liar. But this was one of the first anti-D&D films to ever come out, even including star power from Forrest Gump. Look at that cover, with his face proudly displayed on it, and, oh wait, this was a cover they made years later after he got famous. With the growing popularity of games like Dungeons & Dragons, we should expect not only moral panic, but also films to try and help enlighten the masses on the dangerous power that comes with these kinds of games. So, let's see what kind of stuff this movie gets wrong. I'm sorry, there was an error in the script. What I meant to say was, spread the truth about Dungeons & Dragons. This is Mazes and Monsters. We begin with the police and a fire department looking for a missing college student down a mine. News reporters talk about the story, saying the student went down in the mines because of something that had to do with the titular game. We flash back 6 months prior where we see our cast of characters, most of them being college students. First up is JJ as he comes home to his mother, who seems to have an obsession with redecorating and reorganizing his room every so often.
Where's all my stuff? My furniture?
I can tell you don't like it.
Don't like it? I hate it.
JJ, do you know how many of my clients would give their eye teeth for a Julia Brockway room like this?
Well, this isn't too outside of their family, I suppose, since JJ has his own obsession, wearing hats. Seriously, for the first half of this movie, he is always wearing a different hat in every scene. I don't know about you, but this is one strange and quirky family. Nothing but weird and wacky stuff going on in that household. Then we get our next character, Kate, as she talks to her mother on a pier about her dreams of becoming a writer, as well as her parents' divorce.
So Noreen is boring, huh? Boring is the nicest thing I can say about chlorine. Kate.
She is your father's wife now.
No, you're my father's wife.
Oh, baby, it's been over a long time. But I love you for saying it. By the way, how is the writing coming?
I've got writer's block, but I finally figured out why. It's because I haven't really lived yet, so how can I write about things I don't know about?
After that, we get Daniel, who, I don't know, looks like he's trying to be that one character from Robert Ruff, or whatever that old cartoon was called. Anyway, Daniel is a young suburbanite who tells his parents he wants to become a computer game developer for a living. His father seems alright with it, but his mother, rightfully so, wants him to go to MIT instead.
Daniel, this is a very competitive world, and you're going to have to live in it now. Not later, but now. Later, you're not going to be able to find a job. Later, they're going to want the computer expert from MIT, not a game player from that Grant University.
Because as we all know, there is little to no money or career aspects in that kind of field. Granted, I've done very little research on the subject, but I'm just going to take this movie at face value and accept the fact that there's probably no money to be made on the online computer video game design scene. So we finally see this Grant University, and we find out that JJ, Kate, and Daniel are all friends who play the popular role-playing game Mazes and Monsters. It seems they're now looking for a fourth player, so they spread out and hand out some flyers across campus. Lucky for them, they're getting a new student at the school, Robbie, played by a very young Sheriff Woody. As soon as Robbie gets to the college, he sees the flyer in the cafeteria. Robbie doesn't seem too interested, as JJ begins to talk to him and tries to invite him into their group. And for some reason he's dressed like a 1940s pilot. Again, wild and wacky stuff. Robbie decides to go to the party they're holding and soon forms a relationship with the group.
I played a game called Mazes and Monsters a little too much.
You're kidding. What level?
Ninth level.
So am I.
Oh.
Isn't it wonderful to be finally creating your own scenarios?
Yeah, and your own fantasies, too. I'm really gonna miss it.
So with everyone in their trio taking an instant liking to Robbie, and since he's also an avid player of Mazes and Monsters, they invite him to their next campaign. Daniel takes the role of the maze controller, as they call it, and everyone else goes down their characters.
I am Pardieu, a holy man. In reaching the 9th level, I have acquired many magic spells and charms, the greatest of which is the Graven Eye of Timur. But I also have a sword, which I only use should my magic fail me.
After the game goes well, despite being the Satan game, Robbie and Kate begin to fall for one another, as we then get a lovey-dovey romance montage. Well, I'll give them one thing. At least it doesn't have them doing something blasphemous like holding hands. No, you're only allowed to do that kind of thing after you're married.
Maybe I should smash my motorbike into the dorm wall. It's too ordinary. They think it was just an accident. You know that no Grant University student has ever committed suicide?
Where did any of this come from? I mean, they never once hinted that he was depressed or feeling this way, not even in secret. I mean, I guess this is the movie's way of connecting it to the real-life story. But still, this character motivation feels incredibly out of nowhere. He considers doing this in the local mine, but decides that he must kill off his character in the game before he can do that.
Freelit jumps into the pit to gather the treasure. How much does Freelit get?
It's a trap.
No.
The pit is filled with sharp, gem-encrusted spikes. Freelit, the fanatic of Glossamere, is impaled.
Because his character is now dead, that means they have to start a new campaign, and JJ is now the maze controller. In the real world! So with everyone donning costumes, they head to these caverns to play the game in the mine. JJ hides in the darkness to voice the one controlling the game, which according to Gary and Phil is blasphemous, and I still agree with that. The group then continues to roam around.
Perhaps he was on a mission such as ours.
Be careful, could be a trick. Some skeletons possess mystical powers.
Perhaps there's a clue hidden in the skull.
Beware of the sacrilege.
Wait, what'd he say?
Beware of the sacrilege.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, Robbie. Thank you. You're the one good patron saint out of this band of occultist D&D players. With a newly found clue, they all split up. While Robbie goes on his own, he envisions a lizard creature, possibly an alien, but his friends rush to his aid and tell him that there's nothing there and that it was all in his head. They all leave happily and enjoying the game, but it clearly impacted Robbie the worst, as from this point on in the film, he will then slowly lose a grip on reality. Ha! You see, most people who like things that I don't understand, like rock music and video games, clearly don't have a tenuous grasp on reality. That night, Robbie begins to have a nightmare where he's being called to the Great Hall.
When you are worthy, then you will come to the two towers and be one with the Great Hall.
So, the tunnel to this Great Hall place is just 36-inch drain piping? Anyway, as you heard, the Great Hall vision tells Robbie to be more like his Pardue character, including going celibate and distancing himself from Kate's advances. So now that she's single, Daniel starts to move in on her. Robbie's obsession gets worse as he starts making a map to this Great Hall, including a destination called the Two Towers. Oh, I get it now. Robbie's just a really big fan of Tolkien's work. Don't worry, Robbie, I understand. As a fellow fan, I personally believe that Two Towers was to Lord of the Rings what Empire was to Star Wars. Kate goes into the mine to search for the treasure behind JJ's back, as it turns out that Daniel is there as well. This is where their relationship starts to blossom.
You know, I was always like Mr. Spock from Star Trek. I thought I had no feelings like a Vulcan. I never thought I could fall in love.
Not like Mr. Spock at all. You're like the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, who thought he had no heart, and all along he had the biggest heart of all.
Everybody ends up at a Halloween party. Believe me, I'd love for the people who made this film to make an anti-Halloween PSA movie. They do just as good a job with that as they did with this film. But Robbie flees into the night. The next morning, his friends go looking for him. They call his parents to let him know he's missing, and after they search his room, they find the map he made. Concerned for their friend, they look for him in the mines and later go to the police to file a missing persons report.
Robbie a doper?
No.
Downers?
No.
Drink?
Well, you know, like anybody, a little wine or beer, but...
You see, the movie's right on the money. Drugs, alcohol, Dungeons and Dragons, all the same thing.
One of the players Robbie played with got carried away and killed him.
Well, that's kind of far out.
Mazes and Monsters is a far-out game.
So now we're back to the beginning of the movie with the officials searching down the mine. Kate finally pieces together that Robbie is in New York City. Anyway, with Robbie now stuck in gamer mode, he's about to get mugged by some street toughs, but he levels up and stabs the gang leader with a pocket knife. Realizing what he's done, he temporarily snaps out of it, rushing over to a payphone to call Kate and tell her what happened.
Robbie, it's gonna be all right. Where are you exactly?
There's blood on my knife!
Knife! What happened?
And it's on my hands! I think I killed somebody! I know I killed somebody!
Kate ends up getting the rest of her friends to head down to New York to help look for Robbie. Back in his delusional state, Robbie ends up wandering into the underground subway thinking that it's a maze, but he's quickly startled by a train because he thinks it's a dragon. He runs off and comes across a homeless man, who he believes is a king, who tells him where the two towers are. Moving on, they make it just in time before Robbie can end up jumping off. It's here where Robbie begins to flip-flop in and out of character and break down and cry in front of his friends.
Pardue, what are you doing?
Going to join the Great Hall.
You can't, it's a trap.
I have spells. I'm going to fly.
You don't have enough points. I am the maze controller, and I have absolute authority in this game. game?
TJ, what am I doing here?
3 months later, Robbie's friends come to visit him at his home since he's apparently dropped out of college now. All seems fine at first, but it's quickly revealed that he's now permanently stuck thinking that he's his Pardue character and that he believes he lives in a fantasy world. So, his friends decide they'll humor him and go on one more adventure as they walk into the sunset.
And so, we played the game again, for one last time. It didn't matter that there were no maps, or dice, or no monsters. Pardue saw the monsters. We did not. We saw nothing but the death of hope and the loss of our friend. And so we played the game until the sun began to set and all the monsters were dead.
And so that was Mazes and Monsters. Now, some people who seem to be more familiar with Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games would probably say something along the lines of, not only does the movie get a ton of things wrong, but it's also a little bit sick and morbid of them to take a real-life tragedy and exploit it just so that they can sell an agenda of being against role-playing games and how it's some kind of Satan tool. As a movie itself, it is very cheesy and dated, especially considering that it's a TV movie from the 80s, and the fact that Tom Hanks doesn't really seem to give a crap with his performance makes it 10 times funnier to watch, so it does have that going for it. But I just have to say, as a person who has never played Dungeons & Dragons or a role-playing game, just like Deception of a Generation, this movie was right on the money and I completely agreed with it. So just based on that alone, I give it a thumbs up, an A+, and a 7 out of 10. Not gonna go 8, because it's not perfect. It's not Deception of a Generation, it's not Tyler Perry's Temptation, but it's still very good. Tune in to the next episode where we're going to be revisiting our good friends over at Jeremiah Films with their Pagan Invasion series, because I personally think that there's a lot that needs to be said about this satanic, demonic, horribly occultic holiday that is coming up in a couple of weeks. But until then, may Jesus be with you, and
everybody's mundane and they look like Jen Garner and Tom Hanks. I prefer anime.